In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this city render from start to finish right here. So this one's packed full of a whole bunch of techniques to get your cities to look better, to get your buildings to look better, and how to make them easier, and how to fill it with life and vibrancy and advertisements and all that stuff. So it should be really helpful, but quick one. So enjoy the video. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing is actually changing the theme to this Cyberpunk hacker theme. I'll link this below if you want to just a direct download to it for free. So as usual, I'm just blocking out the rough idea that I have. I was going into this one with a basic idea of the scene layout. I've been seeing a lot of renders where it's like a cyberpunk city shot across the water. So, you know, the first thing I wanted to do is kind of show my general workflow of making buildings. And it's just really quite simple here. So I'm just doing a cube, loop cuts, a couple of bevels on those loops, and then just extrude some of those lines that I'm making in. Very basic level modeling of just getting a grid and then extruding it inwards basically. The important thing is putting a concrete texture on the outside and then kind of like a hybrid metal glass material on the inside. So it's like metal, like metallic up, roughness down, alpha down a little bit. So it's not refracting it, it's just bringing a bit of light through, but still reflecting a bit. And then the cool thing is using this emissive shader on the inside where it's just a building window texture that shines through that low alpha window material and creates this really natural looking building window texture that works super well with just any kind of building geometry as long as you have any kind of window texture for it to shine through. Looks great from far away and works so well for these kinds of renders. So then I'm just bringing in a bunch of buildings from my free buildings pack as well. Link below to that if you want it. It comes with like around 10 or so free buildings that I've made, and so you can just get that. A bunch of people have been using that over the last like year or two, so it's cool seeing that in a bunch of people's renders. But anyways, that I use those too, so I'm bringing a bunch of those in, and that's really helpful for making a city. It's just having preset buildings. And then I'm kind of just using the same technique here, except just doing it in a weird, I don't know, I think I was taking some inspiration from like that building in Singapore where there's a boat on the roof between two buildings. Like they have like crazy architecture there. So I wasn't going for an actual boat, but just something like that where it's this huge overhanging thing that's like a bridge between two buildings and itself is like integrated into the building. I thought that was really cool, so I'm doing something kind of inspired by that here. And then one thing that I like to do sometimes is just bring in a big giant image plane of a city. This one actually works because it's from the same angle, shot like across the water as well. Not that the water matters here, but just it's the same low angle looking head on at a city. So that means it's super easy to just throw that in here and repeat it a bunch of times throughout the city. One thing I'm actually doing here is having that image plane, but turning off underneath ray visibility for that plane, turning off the camera view. So you can't see it in the render, but you can see it in the reflections of the building windows and the water a little bit. And I'm just strategically placing that around so that we're getting like really, really natural building window reflections all over the place, but you're not seeing too much of the fake 2D city, which becomes too obvious if you go too far with that. So having the reflections really, really livens up the city and makes it feel so much more real, because it's actually all the building windows in the scene are reflecting an actual city, and you can't quite tell because it's in the reflection. It's a little bit hidden, but it just adds so much warmth and life to the city. So it's one of my favorite techniques to do that. So you can choose to have it on the camera view or not. It just depends what you want. I was doing a bit of both here, and then that just works so well for this. And you can see here I'm adding in just some interesting different towers, making some really low poly assets with some wireframes and some little satellite dish things with just some basic cylinders and, you know, red emissive materials, putting that on this like big pyramid type building. That one I was kind of inspired by two things. One of them being probably Blade Runner, having those big giant industrial buildings. And two is actually in Las Vegas. If you've ever been there or seen pictures of it, they have that like giant fucking pyramid building in the middle of the city with a big laser beam shooting at the top. That is pretty cool. So I was definitely taking some inspiration for that for this building here. And then for those neon signs, I'm using my technique of just taking an image plane. This is just a stock photo running into the emission on a plane. And then you can actually just line up the corners of the 4 vertices of that plane on the UV editor. And even if an advertisement is like fully crooked and sideways at a weird perspective in the image, you can just line up those corners and get it to actually stretch perfectly to your to like the outline of the sign and get a actually head-on perspective of it, which is really handy. And then yeah, just more duplication of this background city, trying to keep it hidden so it's not too visible, but still just peeking through enough to fill in the gaps where my 3D geometry isn't quite enough. And then by this point I needed a foreground, so I just went on the Polyhaven add-on here and just started dropping in these free assets. So you can get all these models for free from the Polyhaven website if you want, or get their add-on, which is paid, which I'm using here, which is really handy because it just puts them all into the asset browser in Blender. So I'm just dropping in these free models, anything that just seems kind of like it's fits into like a street type environment. I'm just kind of throwing whatever might work here. So random lights, modeling some basic little concrete pillars, and then I'm throwing in like chairs, garbage, debris, trays of I don't even know what, just like random drinks and stuff and cups. And that was kind of enough to get it to look a little bit more full. And then here I'm modeling this extremely high quality plane, which I put in the distance. So that's just a little tiny little thing that I threw way out there. I did a little bit more work on that later just to polish it up by making it a bit more metallic and stuff, but it's so tiny I just wanted a tiny little thing in the distance there. And then I'm also throwing in this interesting cube with it's a principled volume with a gradient texture running into not the actual volume but rather the emission strength. The volume is actually shut off on that, and then you can just rotate the cube to however you want. And then so I kind of just rotate it upwards, so there's this emissive gradient coming from the bottom of the city fading out as it goes upwards. And that is another thing you can do to just add life and just this nice natural glow from the city. So it's really nice doing that. Makes it feel much more full and alive again. And then here I'm adding that just spotlight shining straight up, super bright through the volume. I did end up going back also and just doing a little bit more work on the foreground too. So here I'm just adding this little bridge with just like these, it wasn't anything too fancy, just cubes in a line. And then here I'm just adding more neon signs. I spent a little while just going in, finding any little detail in these images that I could, and then just putting that anywhere where it was feeling like it needed a little bit more life. So you can see me just going in and just repeating that as many times as I can and trying not to duplicate the same sign too many times. The reason why I love this technique of getting one image with tons of different advertisements already in it, which is a picture of some city, is because it makes it so much easier to just go in and get, like, you can extract like 50 different advertisements for your own city from that one thing and not have to worry about like adding a new texture every time. And then yeah, I'm just throwing in more renders of mine, anything I can, where it's just kind of like, these are like just fun little Easter eggs where I'm putting in my own renders that maybe some people will recognize, and just kind of having that as like artwork on the buildings, or like here's the one I did, this was my last video on this render right here, putting that on a building. I don't know if anyone actually saw that, but it's in there. It's just kind of fun to have that. And then yeah, there's another one of my renders for the Arborea building. Just kind of, it's just fun doing stuff like that where it's like, it's like an advertisement for an actual thing, and then it's my render underneath it, and it's integrated into the city. It's just fun doing stuff like that. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this one. Again, link below to that pack of free buildings that I was using in this one. Should be pretty helpful if you're making a city render like this. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in some other video.